Thy name is my healing.
A clean heart, O God, let me be like you in all my ways. Give me your strength, teach me your song, shelter me in the shadow of your wings. For we are your righteousness. If we die to ourselves and live through your death, we shall be born again to be blessed in your love. Create in me a clean heart, O God. Let me be like you in all my ways. Give me your strength, teach me your song, shelter me in the shadow of your wings. For we are your righteousness. If we die to ourselves and live through your death, we shall be born again to be blessed in your love. Create in me a clean heart, O God. Let me be like you in all my ways. Give me your strength, teach me your song, shelter me in the shadow of your wings. For we are your righteousness. If we die to ourselves and live through your death, we shall be born again to be blessed in your love. We shall be born again to be blessed in your love.
I believe, yes, I believe, oh, that Jesus, he died for me, and with the coming of Baha'u'llah, all mankind will be set free. Oh Lord, I'm your child. Oh Lord, I'm your child. I'm down here working in your vineyard. Can't do nothing till you come. I believe, yes, I believe, oh, that the Bob, he died for me, and with the coming of Baha'u'llah, all mankind will be set free. And with the coming of Baha'u'llah, all
So now we're open for any prayers, praise, devotions anyone would like to give. Winnie?
Okay. Thinking of all of the children that are really having a hard time with these laws.
Oh, we lost you, Winnie.
Yeah, I'm back. I know I must have bumped the key.
Okay.
O thou kind Lord, these lovely children are the handiwork of the fingers of thy might and the wondrous signs of thy greatness. O God, protect these children, graciously assist them to be educated and enable them to render service to the world of humanity. O God, these children are pearls. Cause them to be nurtured within the shell of thy loving kindness. Thou art the bountiful, the all-loving. Abdul Baha.
Okay, friends, because we are 71 participants, I will need to ask you to use the chat room if you want to say a prayer, because I cannot see everyone now at all, not on both screens. So if you'd like to say a prayer, sing, recite, chant, just put your name in the chat room and then I'll call you. That's okay. Don't be shy. Okay, Cynthia.
I am officially calling this the Zoom prayer.
Okay.
Blessed is the spot and the house and the place and the city and the heart and the mountain and the refuge in the cave and the valley and the land and the sea and the island and the meadow, where mention of God hath been made, and His praise glorify Thank you, Baha'u'llah.
Diane, did you want to say a prayer? Oh, Nason.
Oh Lord, my God, and my haven and my distress, my shield and my shelter in my woes, my asylum and refuge in time of need. And in my loneliness, my companion. Oh Lord, my God, and my haven in my distress, my shield and my shelter in my woe. In my anguish, my solace, in my solitude, a loving friend. In my anguish, my solace, and in my solitude, a loving friend. Oh Lord, my God, and my haven in my distress, my shield and my shelter in my woe. My shield and my shelter in my woe.
Okay, we have Berdina, Milton, and then Chuck.
Prayer for America from Abdu'l-Baha. O thou kind Lord, this gathering is turning to thee. These hearts are radiant with thy love. These minds and spirits are exhilarated by the message of thy glad tidings. O God, let this American nation, the democracy, become glorious in spiritual degrees, even as it has aspired to material degrees, and render this just government victorious. Confirm this revered nation to upraise the standard of the oneness of humanity and promulgate the most great peace, and thereby become most glorious and praiseworthy among all the nations of the world. O God, this American nation is deserving of thy favor and is worthy of thy mercy. Make it precious and near to thee, through thy bounty and bestowal. Abdu'l-Baha.
Oh God, make me a hollow reed, from which the pith of self hath been blown, that I may become a clear channel through which thy love may flow to others. Oh God, oh my God, make me a hollow reed, from which the pith of self hath been blown, that I may become a clear channel through which thy love may flow to others. Oh God, make me a hollow reed, from which the pith of self hath been blown, that I may become a clear channel through which thy love may flow to others.
Thou art the Almighty and loving. Thou art the Almighty and loving. Lord, pitiful are we, grant us thy favor. Pour, bestow upon us a share from the ocean of thy well. Needy, do thou satisfy us. Abased, give us thy glory. The fowls of the air and the beasts of the field receive their meat each day from thee, and all beings partake of thy care and loving kindness. Deprive not this feeble one of thy wondrous grace, and vouchsafe thy might under this helpless soul thy bounty. Give us our daily bread, and grant thine increase in the necessities of life, that we may be dependent on none other but thee, may commune wholly with thee, may walk in thy ways, and declare thy mysteries. Thou art the Almighty and loving, and the provider of all mankind.
Amir, and then Ormond.
I'm new to the Baha'i faith and new to this group, and
Welcome.
thank you. The divine religious must be the cause of oneness among men, and the means of unity and love. They must promulgate the universal free man from every prejudice, bestow joy and gladness, exercise kindness, and do always with every difference and distinction. Baha'u'llah addressing the world of humanity says, "O people, ye are the fruits of one tree, and the leaves of one branch." Abdul Baha.
Welcome, Amir. Allahu Akbar. O Lord, my God, Provide the means,
provide the means,
make safe the path,
make safe the path,
and guide our way.
and guide our way.
For verily thou art
For verily thou art
the help in peril,
the help in peril,
the self-subsisting,
the self-subsisting,
Yah Baha'u'llah.
Yah Baha'u'llah.
O Lord my God,
O Lord my God,
open thou the door,
open thou the door,
provide for me,
provide the means,
make safe the path,
make safe the path,
and guide our way.
and guide our way.
For verily thou art
For verily thou art
the help in peril,
the help in peril,
self-subsisting,
the self-subsisting,
Yah Baha'u'llah.
Yah Baha'u'llah.
Yah Baha'u'llah.
Yah Baha'u'llah.
Kenton.
Hello, buenas noches, Aguirre. Yeah, one of our big challenges is keeping focus on Baha'u'llah, washing the dishes, cleaning the toilet, ironing the clothes, taking care of business. This is a song about that. I wake up every morning with my mind set on Baha'u'llah. Wake up every morning with my mind set on Baha'u'llah. Wake up every morning with my mind set on Baha'u'llah. Ya Baha, Ya Baha, Ya Baha'u'llah. I eat my breakfast with my mind set on Baha'u'llah. Eat my breakfast with my mind set on Baha'u'llah. Eat my breakfast with my mind set on Baha'u'llah. Ya Baha, Ya Baha, Ya Baha'u'llah. I work all day with my mind set on Baha'u'llah. I work all day with my mind set on Baha'u'llah. Work all day with my mind set on Baha'u'llah. Ya Baha, Ya Baha, Ya Baha'u'llah. I come back home with my mind set on Baha'u'llah. Come back home with my mind set on Baha'u'llah. Come back home with my mind set on Baha'u'llah. Ya Baha, Ya Baha, Ya Baha'u'llah. I sleep all night with my mind set on Baha'u'llah. Sleep all night with my mind set on Baha'u'llah. Sleep all night with my mind set on Baha'u'llah. Ya Baha, Ya Baha, Ya Baha'u'llah.
Well, I think on that high note and that joyful note, thank you, Kenton. You had head shaking and people singing along with you. You're going to have to do that one again for us so we can all learn that one. That was wonderful.
That's right.
Thank you all, friends, very much. Those were wonderful devotions from everyone. And a special welcome to Amir, who says he's just become a Baha'i. Welcome. You're welcome in this space at any time and in any Baha'i space. That's how we are. So we're delighted to have you, an official member of the family, so to speak. Okay, thank you again, friends. And again, I'm going to ask everyone to stay on mute, please, throughout the presentation. And normally when we have a presentation, I'll introduce the presenter and then I'm quiet, you know, until the end, and then I facilitate the questions and so forth. This time we're doing it just a little bit differently. We'll still have questions and answers, you know, that kind of thing at the end. But Gillian and I thought we would try something that was more conversational. So I may be asking her questions about things that I don't quite understand, you know, to maybe elaborate on this or that a little bit, or to help clarify some things. She's going to give us a little bit of science, and not all of us are that adept. I'll speak for myself, okay? So you may see me interacting with her during the presentation. We planned this, not the actual interactions, but you know, we decided this is something that, you know, we would both feel comfortable doing. And her husband, Nason, is going to be reading some of the wonderful quotations that she's provided. So this is a bit different, again, than our normal presentations. So having prepared you in that way, oh, and with respect to the chat room, I'd like to ask you to please reserve any conversation amongst yourself. Hopefully you won't be doing that. We'll all be paying attention to our speaker. But if you feel necessary to make a comment to someone else in the group, please do it privately. The chat log, I share that with our presenters afterwards. So after we're done, that right now, that is not a good place to put your questions. So if you have questions as we go along, please just note them down, okay? Well, we may take a short breather space right after the presentation, and then go into the question and answers, okay? And so we'll have ample time for questions and comments, but also for continued conversation if you feel it's warranted. Okay, so finally, let me introduce Gillian Sturdevent. Gillian is a practicing physical therapist. She graduated from Howard University in 2001, and she's continued her training in cranial sacral therapy and manual training from the Bahá'í Institute. She is also in the process of becoming a presenter for Healing from the Core, a healing modality that focuses on learning skills for listening to the body's innate wisdom. She has worked at Johns Hopkins Hospital and in all types of clinical settings and with all ages. Currently, her work is in outpatient pediatrics. Gillian is also a mother of 3 and has been on a journey to understand the role of Baha'is in achieving race unity since her childhood. So with that, I'd like to welcome Gillian, and again, go on speaker view if you're not there yet. And Gillian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sherilyn. I've been nervously waiting, but I was very appreciative of all the prayers. I was very happy to see Milton come on. I wasn't sure if he was going to come on, and especially sing the hollow reed prayer, because in a way, what I'm talking about today connects to that. And we can kind of go into that later. This is a huge topic. And when Sherilyn asked me to do this, I wasn't sure I wanted to because it's such a huge topic. But she kind of talked me into it, and I'm excited to talk about it because I love this work. I've always been fascinated with the body and how the body works, which is what pulled me into physical therapy. When I started doing manual work, and body work, I started seeing how some of the bodies that I saw and how the events and actions, how trauma affected the body and how I could feel it within their systems. And then when we would go through a session, sometimes emotions and stories would come up and their body would also heal, like balance out through that process, and they would feel better. So it was almost like we were working through the trauma, going through the body system. And I found that fascinating. So then I started doing a lot of reading and research into how the body holds on to trauma. And that has been a new growing body of knowledge over the last couple of decades that has really exploded. With the start of learning about epigenetics as well, on how trauma travels through generations from grandmother or grandfather, whatever, down through their children and our grandchildren. And now they even have studies that show that that may even go further than that by several generations, which is so fascinating. Then I found Dr. Joy DeGruy's work in post-traumatic slave syndrome. And that made so much sense to me. It was talking about how, and I don't know if everyone has read her work, but it really gave context to kind of how trauma affects bodies in African Americans, and how from chattel slavery up through now, how that really affects kind of how people are through their trauma experiences. And when I was reading and listening to her talks, I started to think about, like, I wonder, how that affects white bodies. Like, what does that mean also for the other side? Because I know that there's an epigenetic component from the other side as well, you know? And then I came up into Dr. Resmaa Menakem's work. I was introduced to his work. Now, he is an African-American somato-abolitionist, is what he would say. He's a trauma specialist that works specifically with racial trauma and body systems. So I was very drawn to his work. And so tonight's discussion is going to kind of be discussing, I went into my nervous brain, kind of combining some of the Baha'i writings with the science behind some of the nervous system, and then Dr. Menakem's work, and trying to kind of correlate all of that. Dr. Menakem, Resmaa Menakem.
Right.
Yeah, and his book is called My Grandmother's Hands.
Mm-hmm. And friends, if you don't worry, we'll give you references to everything that's mentioned here, okay? So if we could keep the chat closed while the presentation is going on, we really appreciate it, because it's a bit of a distraction. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah, for writing the name down.
Mm-hmm.
When Charlotte asked me to do this, like a few weeks later, she asked me, all right, you have to come up with a name. And I was like, how on earth am I going to come up with a name that fits this? And I had to think about it for a while. And what came up from some of the writings that Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha had was polishing the mirror from the dross of racial trauma. The mirror is often used as an example for the body in some of the Baha'i writings. So I'm going to kind of go into some of how that is explained through some of his stuff. So what I would like to start with, and racial trauma is basically, it's trauma that affects, it's race-based stress that affects your body system. Typically it's talked about in African Americans and the indigenous and all that, but with Dr. Menakem, he kind of goes also into how it affects white bodies. But I would like to start with reading a quote from him. It says, many African Americans know trauma intimately from their own nervous systems, also from the experiences of the people that they love, and also, and most often from both. But African Americans are not alone in this. A different but equally real form of racialized trauma lives in the bodies of most white Americans. And a third, often deeply toxic type of racialized trauma lives and breathes in the bodies of many America's law enforcement officers. This means that no matter what we look like, if we were born and raised in America, what he calls white body supremacy, and our adaptations to it are in our blood. Our very bodies house the unhealed dissonance and trauma of our ancestors. I would add also that this trauma to some degree is in all bodies. Anti-Blackness is kind of a worldwide issue, but within the US, it's been emphasized. Our country has kind of been built on it. So even moving in sometimes as an immigrant or as someone who hasn't been born and raised here can sometimes have effect with this racialized trauma. And then once you live here, as you assimilate into this culture, that can be deepened or made more prevalent without subconsciously, without really being aware of it. I think something that in this vein that I found very interesting is Isabella Wilkerson in her book Caste describes this really well in terms of, she's like, it's kind of like when you move into this country, it's like when she buys an old house, like 100-year-old house that she loved. And as she moved in there, she noticed that there was an area that looked like it had a leak. It was like a water stain. So she had to get somebody to come in and check out to see what was going on. When they cut it open, they found mold and mildew all up in through her rafters. And now she has a choice. She bought this house. She's here living in it now. So do I take all the money and time to pay to clean up this mold and fix my house? Or do I try to ignore that it is there? So it's sort of like when you move into this country, there is this underlying kind of problem within this country that is there, that we now have to help try to clean up and heal so that our house is kind of a safe place to live. And if we ignore it, it will actually destroy it and can make us sick. So I really liked her example of kind of how all of us have a part to play in this, no matter where we grew up. If we live here and really anywhere, we all have our part to play. What I would like to do with this background now, I just kind of gave a general overview of that. I want to talk about how the soul and body interact, followed by the role of the nervous system in balancing our body, and then kind of what is trauma, and then some ways that we can heal some of this trauma.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go in and out of sharing my screen, if that's okay. If it becomes a problem and you want me to keep the slide up, I can. Just let me know. I hope that this is the right, whoops. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, so Nason is going to read the quote.
Know that the influence and perception of the human spirit is of two kinds. That is, the human spirit has two modes of operation and understanding. One mode is through the mediation of bodily instruments and organs. Thus, it sees with the eye, hears with the ear, speaks with the tongue. These are actions of the spirit and operations of the human reality. But they occur through the mediation of bodily instruments. Thus, it is the spirit that sees, but by means of the eye. It is the spirit that hears, but by means of the ear. It is the spirit that speaks, but by means of the tongue. Second, the rational soul, meaning the human spirit, does not descend into the body. That is to say, it does not enter it, for descent and entrance are characteristics of bodies, and the rational soul is exempt from this. The spirit never entered this body, so in quitting it, it will not be in need of an abiding place. No, the spirit is connected with the body, as this light is with this mirror. When the mirror is clear and perfect, the light of the lamp will be apparent in it. And when the mirror becomes covered with dust or breaks, the light will disappear.
So this is where the concept of the mirror being compared to the body in this quote, I think is important. And the recognizing the light of the lamp being apparent in it as our soul is reflecting through our body into this physical world. And I think it would be good to consider, in the line of that thought, the nature of light. I found this example of a scientific experiment in Dr. Michael Penn's work. He is a psychologist and a professor who works at Franklin and Marshall up in Pennsylvania. And he wrote a series of a paper on the soul, mind, body, soul connection. And I found this example of this scientific experiment in his work. It was described, it's described by physicist Arthur Zanjonk, and it is for considering the nature of light. So these are his words. As part of what I call Project Eureka, a friend and I have designed and constructed a science exhibit in which one views a region of space filled with light. It is a simple but startling demonstration that uses only a carefully fabricated box and a powerful projector whose light shines directly into it. We have taken a special care to ensure that light does not illuminate any interior objects or surfaces in the box. Within the box, there is only pure light and lots of it. The question is, what does one see? How does light look when left entirely to itself? Approaching the exhibit, I turn on the projector, whose bulb and lenses can be seen through a plexiglass panel. The projector sends a brilliant light through optical elements into the box beside it. Moving over to a viewport, I see into the box and at the light within. And what do I see? Absolute darkness. I see nothing but the blackness of empty space. On the outside of the box is a handle connected to a wand that can move into and out of the box's interior. Pulling the handle, the wand flashes through the dark space before me, and I see the wand brilliantly lit on one side. The space clearly is not empty, but it's filled with light. Yet without an object on which the light can fall, one sees only darkness. Light itself is always invisible. We see only things, only objects, not light. So in relation to that, the human soul or spirit, like light, cannot be known directly. In order for it to manifest itself, a vehicle is required. Thus, the human brain and body make it possible for the manifestation of the powers of the human spirit in much the same way that a mirror provides a means for the manifestation of the qualities of light.
Could you repeat that last part one more time? That was really important. Good.
Sure. The human soul or spirit, like light, cannot be known directly. In order for it to manifest itself, a vehicle is required. Thus, the human brain and body make possible the manifestation of the powers of the human spirit in much the same way that a mirror provides a means for the manifestation of the qualities of light. Yeah, that's very powerful. And to think about how our souls reflect through our bodies, like light does through a mirror. And the more whole or healed our bodies can be, the more perfectly we can reflect that light through. And that is, to me, what the song that Milton sang is so connected to. Make me a hollow reed, so that light can flow through as pure as it can. And when we get into the nervous system, we can discuss that a little bit more about what that might mean, physical versus spiritual, when we get to the next quote. Because our bodies really are an instrument. They're provided for our soul so that we can affect change in this world, right? We cannot affect change in this world without our bodies. Also, this body provides us a concrete physical foundation upon which spiritual understandings and insights can be built. the physical and the material is here for us to learn about our spiritual world. If we look for it, we can blind ourselves to it and veil ourselves to it, but it's also our means for great spiritual understanding if we know to look for it. So our bodies really also give us messages. Our body gives us messages when we learn how to listen to them, to help us learn about our spiritual reality. And one of the ways that our body, we talked about how our eyes are the way that our spirit can see, and our ears are the way that our spirit can hear, and our tongue is a way for us to communicate. Our spirit can communicate. Another system that is part of this process is the nervous system. And specifically, I want to talk about what's called the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is actually, it controls, basically, it controls all the parts of our system that act unconsciously. So our breathing, our heart rate, our digestion, our respiratory rate, sexual arousal, urination, our eyes constricting, all of that. Our autonomic nervous system controls all of that in our body. There's two pieces to this autonomic nervous system. One of them is called the sympathetic system. And I'm naming it. I know sometimes some of the medical terminology may be problematic for some, but I'm naming this for a reason because of the quote we're about to read. The sympathetic system is the part of the nervous system that functions to its movement. So it increases blood flow throughout the body so that we can be active. It increases our heart rate. It helps support movement. So you can't get up in the morning without your sympathetic system causing your heart rate to be increased, and your muscles to move and the blood to flow. So your sympathetic system is that piece to it. And it also works with fight and flight behaviors, which we will get more into in a minute. There is another part of the autonomic nervous system. So we have the sympathetic, and then we have the balancer to the sympathetic. The name of the nerve is a vagus nerve, if you want to know the technical term, but it's the balancer of the sympathetic system. This balancer is something that we actually have a way to affect through different things that helps balance our system. And I will also get into that in a little bit later. But I think that is important to know. So I'm going to go back to sharing. So here is actually a picture on the left. That is a picture of the balancer of the sympathetic system, which is the vagus nerve. But I'm going to have Nason read the quote from Abdu'l-Bahá.
The powers of the sympathetic nerve are neither entirely physical nor spiritual, but are between the two systems. The nerve is connected with both. Its phenomena shall be perfect when its spiritual and physical relations are normal. When the material world and the divine world are well correlated, when the hearts become heavenly and the aspirations become pure and divine, a perfect connection shall take place. Then shall this power produce a perfect manifestation. Physical and spiritual diseases will then receive absolute healing.
This quote to me has been so fascinating for decades. I think me trying to understand this quote is what actually has pulled me into becoming a body worker. This connection of the sympathetic nerve, neither entirely physical nor spiritual. It's between the two systems. And having the fact of the balance of it, which is the work of this vagus nerve, this balancer of the sympathetic system. When that is balanced, physical and spiritual diseases will receive absolute healing. I mean, that is a powerful statement to me. and exciting at the same time. There's been a lot of study into this balancer of the sympathetic system. When it's affected through the breath, through meditation, through many music, there's many things that help stimulate this balancer of the sympathetic system so that it helps you stay settled, what we might say settled in your body and fully connected. The thing that's very important with this nerve is it also is the way that it determines whether something is safe or not, whether a person is safe or not, or whether a situation is safe or dangerous. It also is very much connected with community. So being able to read if facial expressions, how feelings of safety and community, whether you can trust somebody or not, a lot of that actually comes from input into that system, into that nervous system, because we are basically nervous systems meeting nervous systems, and we are able to read what another person's body is putting off. So an example of this might be, say you walk into a room and there's a group of people and they're all people you love, right? And you walk up the stairs and you see them. Think about how your body feels. Usually it feels warm, it feels open, you're happy to see them, smiles. Everyone has true, real smiles on their face. You connect. You can sit there together and eat food and talk, and you're just happy to be in each other's company. And there's a level of safety and comfort within that space. If you walk into, now think about a situation where you walk into a room and you don't really know anybody. You feel tighter. You don't feel maybe quite as warm. You feel a little bit more on guard. That's your nervous system trying to determine what is going on. Now, if there's someone in the room who maybe feel uncomfortable about you walking in, right? Your body system, your nervous system will pick up on the signals that their nervous system is putting out, and it will put you on guard. So like you may walk into a space, and I'll get kind of real here. If you are walking to a space where there's, say, a lot of white people within there, and someone who's African-American comes in and they're like, who are these people? What's happening? And a couple of the people in there go into their subconscious fear-based kind of, it's not conscious, it's not within the brain, it's within the body system, where they get a little bit of a tightness of like unsure. That body that walks in, the black body that walks in, will pick up on that subconsciously as well, and then go into high alert also. So they may have, and that's something to be aware of, because if you're thinking in your head, oh, I love black people and you're oneness of mankind and all that, but your body is sending out a separate signal, there's a dissonance kind of there. The other person's body is going to pick up on what your body is saying, not what you're consciously thinking. So it's just something to be aware of. And there's ways to work through that. That's a component to me of the white racial trauma that Dr. Menachem talks about. And there's a way to work through that and recognize when that is happening as well, because sometimes it is subconscious because of the way we've been socialized. Our bodies just react, and we have to work through that. That's how we're going to heal. Not by denying it, but by acknowledging and healing from that process. So sometimes too, this, if you've been through a lot of trauma, when you walk into a space, that system that reads whether something is safe or not can misread a situation. It can read something as dangerous that isn't dangerous because you're in high alert. And that is when you're kind of stuck in like a trauma kind of loop, or your body is holding on to something that hasn't been healed yet. So we can go into that a little bit also. I think the big thing I want to take out of this is that the sympathetic nerve is this connection between the spiritual and the physical, and that there's a way to balance. When we balance it, we have healing, and that we have a way to affect the balancer so that that can take place. We have a way to work with it, and that the nervous system is sometimes subconscious in its messaging. I think that's important to know, because it's precognitive, but we can still work on it to actually improve situations and work towards race unity on a very real level, visceral level. So I I guess we'll go from there into what is trauma. Unless Sherilyn, you have something you want to, if we're good.
You're just rolling along. I mean, keep going.
I feel a little like, oh.
No, you're on your A game. Keep
okay.
going.
We'll see. So what is trauma? So we're going to go into that now. So what the body cares most about that we just talked about was safety and survival.
Mm-hmm.
And so when something happens to the body that is too much, too fast, or too soon, it overwhelms the body and can create trauma. So trauma is not primarily an emotional response. So when we think of trauma, we think of people going into emotional states and all that. It's really not an emotional response. It actually happens within the body. There's an emotional reaction that can happen over the top of it, but the actual trauma happens within the body system. It's in the body. It is a spontaneous protective mechanism used by the body to stop or thwart further or future potential damage. It is not a flaw or a weakness. It's a highly effective tool of safety and survival. It's also not an event. Trauma is not an event. It's a body's protective response to an event or series of events that is perceived as potentially dangerous. This is a very normal system because if you think about it, like when you have a child, like even back in the day or whatever, you have, say, a healthy fear of poisonous snakes, right? And that naturally transmits down through your system. You have a reaction in your body to do, say, fight or flight, right? When you see it, I'm going to go with a different example because I was going to say something else at first, and I'm not ready for that yet.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to go more with actually the traditional saber-toothed tiger thing and fight or flight. So when you're in a situation that's dangerous, like the traditional saber-toothed tiger, or say you are pulled over by a police officer as a Black man, or woman, or you're walking through a space that just really maybe you shouldn't be there, but like different, whatever it is, it's a space that's not necessarily a safe space. When you're in that, your body goes into reaction of what's called fight or flight, which is a normal reaction to a stressful or dangerous situation. You want your body to be able to do this. So in a normal, healthy process, what this would look like, say, with a saber-toothed tiger, is the parasympathetic, the balancer will kind of decrease, so the sympathetic can kick in more. Your heart rate can increase, your blood flow can increase. So you now have a choice of doing fight or flight, which we've all heard about at this point. So do I fight this tiger? Probably not. Or do I run? So I flee the area. And when I use that energy that came up when I went into that system, when I got that fear, the energy builds up. Now, energy cannot be created or destroyed. It just changes form, right? You have to use it somehow so it can move through. So you get ready, the tiger comes, the energy builds up, that system increases, you run. When you get out of the danger space, the run was that release of energy, right? You made yourself into a safe space. You were able to finish the loop. Then when you come back to it, you balance back out into a settled body. Now that's what works in a healthy system, right? So you have stress response, you have a reaction of fighting it or fleeing, you use that energy in that fight or flee, you come back to a safe space and you're able to settle your body back into balance. So that's when it works normally. When you get into a trauma response, okay, so say in the police officer example, you get pulled over and you go into that high level, that energy builds up in your system. Can you run? Probably not a good idea. You could try and it could go badly for you. Can you fight? Really not a good idea, right? So you get stuck in that position. So what happens then is you go into a freeze or a shutdown. And that can cause a definite trauma response because there's a buildup of energy and there's no place for that energy to go. It gets stuck in the system. Mm-hmm. And if this happens over several times, that can build, like trauma can overlay itself, but your body doesn't know the difference between this trauma versus that. It just knows the trauma response, you know, and it has a reaction to it. So when you get stuck in another situation that's not the same even, but it's similar, maybe on some level, your body may have an automatic reaction to that situation based on that trauma loop and how that energy got stuck in your body. So let me see.
Gillian,
Yes.
when in describing that, and I may have missed this because I was taking a note about a couple of things you said that were really good. But you know, when you had these two things going, so one of these is the sympathetic nerve, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is the balancer or the vagus nerve.
Vagus, yep.
Vagus
Balancer.
nerve.
Yep.
Okay, the balancer. And so this is the good place. Everything is.
You want it to be balanced. Yeah,
Is balanced.
When you're in that balanced place, or when things are in that balanced place, then you can sit and relax. You can feel safe.
Okay.
You're able to rest. You can sleep. You're able to eat and digest your food. You know, you can go to the bathroom, all those things. Like those things are not things you're going to want to be able to do if a tiger's chasing after you. You're not going to stop and sit, right? So your that part kind of shuts down or gets decreased. That relaxed or that safety part decreases when you need to have the energy to do something different.
Okay, so the balancer will decrease, so my sympathetic nerve can put more blood and energy into my body so I can take off and run or whatever it is I'm going to do. Okay, so that's that way. What happens when the vagus
nerve,
okay, vagus, when the vagus nerve goes down or up, what happens when it goes in the other direction?
So I mean, I'm kind of trying to simplify the process a little bit. It's not quite an up or down, you know, like I'm trying to make it so it kind of makes sense. Because this is based, well, I don't want to go too into detail with some of
that's fine.
Stuff, but like, so basic, yes, I will say it this way. The sympathetic nerve is, right? The sympathetic nerve has this action. If the vagus nerve is not doing what it needs to do, the heart rate just increase, right? Breathing, increase. So you need the balance so that you're at a nice, safe space of being in the middle, right?
Got that.
When you are in a fight or flight, then you need your heart rate to increase and all that. So this is decreasing. The sympathetic nerve kind of just goes, you know, and this moves up and down. This is the thing that balances it. So when you go into a freeze, that is when the parasympathetic is actually over. Because sometimes, you know, when people, because this vagus nerve, it affects also like going to the bathroom or fainting. Like, so if you're so scared that you faint, that's parasympathetic. Like, I mean, that's the vagus nerve going into overdrive, right? That's your freeze, right? Or if you pee, you urinate on yourself because you're so fearful, or, you know, play possum, you know, play dead, you know, that kind of stuff. That's actually that system kicking in more.
Okay.
You know, and there's more details into that, but that's kind of very basic. Like,
yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Trying to find the best way to describe it in a simple way if possible, you know.
No, that was good.
Yeah. So the threat response cycle was what I was talking about with the tiger when it comes and goes. So this is the key. This is the part that I kind of want to get into with trauma. So during that threat response cycle to a problem that comes up, you have the activation, which is the increase of energy. Then you have the kind of settling, going back down into settling, right? So you could have a traumatic stick where that energy gets stuck in the increase at some point if you can't do something with it, or in the settling aspect of things.
Oh.
Yes, you can. Not when you're in balance. It's more like, it's like you get stuck in the shutdown, maybe stuck when the freeze set, when you're stuck in that freeze state, when you can't get the energy to move out of your system and it's stuck. Okay. So you can be stuck in any of those places. So with being stuck in activation, when you're in that high state of sympathetic or whatever, is you might present as someone who's hypervigilant, have a lot of anxiety, anger, rage. And if you don't go back into that settled body state, that may come out in many different arenas. Like you may get rage or anger at some random thing that makes no sense that you're mad about. You know, that's usually a trauma response. Anything that you overreact to or underreact to has a trauma reaction somewhere in your body. There's a connection to that. So overreaction or underreaction. So the underreaction would be the stuck in the freeze, to where it's almost like you disassociate, like you'll be in a room, but you won't really be there. It's too hard to be there, you know, or you may just go into where you can't be present. You can't be there. It's too hard.
Is it like depression? That
Yeah,
sounds
that's
kind
what I
of
was
like
just gonna say.
depression.
Yeah, and so then you go more into depression. Yep, collapse. People can't really feel you, you know, and that's when you're stuck kind of in that freeze state more. It's stuck in you. Yep. So if you come into a situation that's stressful, people will have different reactions based on how that energy is stuck. If it's stuck in the activation, they may get super angry over the top, you know, or they may be the super nervous, anxious, like can't, you know, always looking over their shoulder kind of situation. Or you're stuck in the freeze state where you shut down, or you're in depression, or you just can't function around certain things. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So a component of this that I think is important to know is that you can have this reaction in your body from a personal trauma that you've experienced, but you can also have this reaction that has come through to your body through DNA, through the epigenetics. They've done a lot more studies into this. So the fears that or something happens to your grandparent, you know, that fear will then be that whatever they're afraid of may come through to you in their DNA, right? So then you're fearful of that same thing, but you don't know why maybe. And it could be a mouse, or it could be, you know, it could be whatever, you know. And then also your child will also have that similar fear. There's an experiment, which I think Dr. Joy DeGruy talks about it. And I remember reading about it prior to that too, with mice. And every time they smelled peppermint, they'd get a shock. Right. And then whenever they share, after they had that happen a few times, whenever they smelled peppermint, they'd be scared, you know, they would avoid it. And then their children were also scared of that peppermint without ever having to be shocked. And also their children's children were also fearful of that peppermint smell, even though they had never physically been shocked. So it traveled through the DNA. And this is actually not technically a negative thing, because what it does is it translates what's dangerous to your offspring. Because sometimes you could forget to teach them about, oh, stay away. This is where the poisonous rattlesnake thing was like, stay away from the poisonous rattlesnake. You know, like if you forget to tell them something, but then they see it, they have a natural fear of it that's translated down through the DNA. It's a safety loop. It's actually helpful for your species to keep going, right? So it's a normal process. But what happens is when you have trauma that happens over generations, like many people of African descent have had, and indigenous, and everyone really in different levels and varying ways, what happens is called traumatic retention. So there's another component to this that I wanted to bring up. When you go through a trauma experience, if you're not able to go through back into settling into a balanced body in your system, your body will sometimes put you in that position again to relive that experience, to then be able to come back into true settling, right? But if you never come back and get that energy out of your system into true settling, you end up re-traumatizing yourself, right? As you keep doing this, after a while, sometimes it can be decontextualized, meaning you won't know what trauma happened to start the behavior. And when that happens, it starts to look like personality. So people are like, man, that person's wild. I don't know what's going on there. You know, it's more like they're doing a trauma loop, like they're re-experiencing it over and over, trying to actually settle the system and heal the trauma. Their body's trying to, but there's a component that's missing to get to that state. Well, the only thing I want to add to that is that as you go through, and then say that person has children, and that pattern goes into them, and then goes into the next generation, over time, that starts to look like culture. So this is something that Dr. DeGruy talks about in her post-traumatic slave syndrome, and which I think is fascinating. And then there's also, it happens in every, I mean, you could think about it with any culture and any family system. You can see aspects of trauma reactions really in every system once you start to know what to look for. But you had a question, Sherilyn.
Yeah, the epigenetics, is that, that's not just transmitting negative things.
Correct.
I mean, there are some good things, obviously, that go that way as well. And with the traumatic retention, so would, at the individual level, so would an example of that be, for example, someone who is always going back to an abuser, or always going into, say, a situation with an alcoholic, or, you know, right?
Yes.
You know, they're constantly going back to this unhealthy behavior, and they don't even understand why
Yep.
they're doing it. Okay.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And you're right. I do want to say the positive absolutely travels through your epigenetics as well. Like, as we heal ourselves, our children too shall be healed. So it's not, oh, it's done. We had this horrible experience for multiple generations, and what are we going to do? There's absolutely, it goes both ways. And that's why it's so important, I think, to work on the healing of each of us, to really help heal the generations coming after. You know, even me working, like, my kids are older, right? But if I work on my healing process, it will heal them now. Like, it's not, it doesn't mean I haven't had them yet. It's going to heal the future kids I may have. It heals my children now, you know, and my grandchildren. It can. So there's never a too late, you know?
That's good to hear.
Yeah, there's never a too late. It's just a matter of putting the work in, you know?
Yeah.
Which is a hard thing sometimes.
Yeah, never say never.
Yeah, and awareness and acknowledgement is the first step, right? If you're not aware, then how do you, right? What do you work with? So
right.
So one of the things I want to talk about is how the body responds to trauma. What does that feel like in your body system? So in your body, it'll feel like a tightness or a constriction or a charge. It's a little bit different for each person. It's shut down, you know, that's how the body reacts to it. And this is all limbic brain or lizard brain stuff. None of this is in the up here in your prefrontal cortex is what they would say, but up here it's not cognitive. This is why now a lot of the somatic healing, working with social workers and psychologists and psychiatrists and stuff, are starting to work with body-led healing, because they have found over time, if you just do the talk therapy, it aspects a part of it, but it doesn't heal the actual body system. There's a book called Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Vanderkolk that talks a lot about this. He's been doing research for about 30 years on this subject, on how the body holds on to trauma and how to heal it through body practices and knowing how the sensations in your body feel so that you can work with it. Yeah. And Dr. Menachem, in his book, My Grandmother's Hands, also has a lot of exercises that work on healing this trauma through the body, because that they have found in combination with, I mean, some people need talk therapy. I'm not downing that at all, but you need a combination. It's not about all of one or all of the other. Yeah. So going back into Dr. Resmaa Menachem's work, specifically with racial trauma, now that we have a kind of idea about all this other stuff. So the body soul connection with the reflection through, like the light through the mirror, the nervous system on how it determines what is safe and what isn't, and how it can read facial expressions, and just being able to sense what the body feels and using that as a tool for us, an instrument for us to understand what our reality might be. And then thinking about what trauma is and how that can get stuck in the body. Going back to what I was talking about earlier when I first started this, is that I'm going to just read it again just to refresh.
Sure.
Many African Americans know trauma intimately, from their own nervous systems. And now we have a better idea of how that might come through. And also from the experiences of the people that they love. But African Americans are not alone in this. A different but equally real form of racialized trauma lives in the bodies of most white Americans, and a third, often deeply toxic type of racialized trauma lives and breathes in the bodies of many of America's law enforcement officers. Now, I have not gone a lot into the law enforcement officers, and I'm not going to do that tonight because that's a whole nother thing that I don't have a lot of experience in, first of all, frankly, but it's fascinating to read his stuff. About that. And he actually does workshops with law enforcement in different places to work on how to settle the bodies so that you don't make the same decisions that you might make otherwise because you're working from a space of trauma when you're out there trying to police people. Yeah.
And was that Menachem stuff you said?
Yep, this is Dr. Resma Menachem in My Grandmother's Hands. He has a whole section on trauma within law enforcement officers.
Okay.
That's fascinating to read. But this means no matter what we look like, if we were born and raised in America, white body supremacy and our adaptations to it are in our blood. Our very bodies house the unhealed dissonance and trauma of our ancestors. So from his perspective, white body racial trauma actually starts as far back as the Middle Ages. He talks about how challenging the Middle Ages were and how problematic they were, and that white bodies traumatized like wealthy white bodies traumatized other white bodies all across Europe. You know, I mean, these things that were perpetrated on the people who were enslaved here and on the indigenous here, many of them were experiencing that and learned that from somewhere, right? And they learned that from the Dark Ages in Europe, you know, and and this carnage and trauma really profoundly affected white bodies and the expression within our DNA, within the DNA. So this historical trauma is closely linked to developing white body supremacy in America. So it's kind of underlying how this was set up for protection, so to speak, of the white body, which is very problematic. So really one of the things that he talks about is white and white adjacent, really everyone on different levels, but really acknowledging what happened. Going back and looking at why did white people give up what they gave up really to co-create structures of culture that are predicated on this idea of whiteness or elevating themselves over others.
When you say gave up, can you elaborate on that? Give an example.
So for me, this is what did we give up in order to traumatize others? Because this is really traumatizing other bodies, right?
So you're like back in the Middle Ages, or
we're coming here. Say we colonize the United States, and we're coming here perpetrating this terror onto other bodies. Okay, right. What are we giving up of ourselves to be able to do that? An aspect of our humanity, for sure.
Yeah.
Our empathy, our ability to see other people as people, our unity, right? We're destroying that bond.
Yeah.
You know, and so why did we decide we were okay with giving that up? You know, what, you know, we have to come to terms with that. We need to acknowledge what happened. We need to acknowledge that, you know, 83 million people were wiped off this earth due to genocide and colonial colonization and people being enslaved. And we have to acknowledge that those things have happened, right? And that they're traumatic. And then we need to do something about it. So we can't ignore our history. We need to hold space for it so that we can heal. If we're not holding space for it, we're not going to heal from it. If we're ignoring it and pretending we don't have this, we're not going to heal from it. There has to be an acknowledgement so that we can do what's necessary, even if it's uncomfortable and painful. We have to. We have to do this. And not only just individually, but also communally. Because traumas also happen to people in groups, right? There needs to be communal healing. So there's personal healing that each of us have to take care of. Then there's communal healing that each one of us need to be a part of. There needs to be communal healing within Black spaces. There needs to be communal healing in white spaces and indigenous spaces and any space that you feel you need that specific kind of healing. And then we need to do healing together. So it needs to be both and all, you know, and because if you haven't done a certain amount of healing, say in an all white space or maybe an all Black space, being able to heal with both white and Black or mixed together can be more challenging. You have to hit a certain amount of healing so that that process does not become more damaging, right? We need to learn how to work together. And if you're coming at it still denying history, you know, what kind of work are we going to be able to work towards the future, you know? So it's really something to acknowledge and think about. So we need to build and really building communities because white people is not a culture. I mean, we've made it one. It's not a culture, right? And it's kind of a ridiculous thing that we met, this man-made thing so we have to develop culture around breaking this down, develop culture about working towards true justice, develop culture, which from my perspective is embodying the advent of divine justice. You know, like we need to build culture proactively in that direction, working towards anti-racism, as Dr. Ibrahim Kendi says, you know, like build culture to be proactively working towards that versus solidifying our whiteness or our white adjacentness or our power structures or economic structures that are based on a lot of this. We're learning how to break that down and change it. That's going to be hard. I think we need to build a lot of stamina around this, you know, especially and humility, you know, that humble posture of learning that we hear talked about often, you know, is inherited. Yeah. He also has, Dr. Resma talks about the HIP theory. This is mostly in Black bodies or African American bodies, and I'm sure indigenous and probably others, but that's his specialty is more in dealing with probably Black bodies. And he talks about that. He's like, I hope that there will be more work into indigenous and some of the Native American and other places.
Definitely. Too. Yeah, definitely.
But he says that there's 4 types of trauma that really overlap. The historical trauma, within our country, the intergenerational, which we kind of talked a little bit about, persistent institutional. And that is kind of what sometimes you can deal with on the day-to-day basis at work or through the financial system, through the education system, through, you know, all these different systems, the government, all these different systems that we have, and then personal traumas. So it's HIP, like the historical, intergenerational, persistent institutional, and personal traumas. Now, your body can't tell the difference between what one trauma is versus another, and they often overlay each other. So your body will have a reaction from wherever that trauma came from. You know, it's a reaction that it has. It doesn't differentiate. But for us, I think for people, it's good to know, to give context to kind of what is going on within their own bodies. Just all the different ways that you might be reading into it, like the trauma, where the trauma can come from. So it was interesting, you know, because Dr. DeGruy came up with the post-traumatic slave syndrome, which, you know, term. And one of the women who work with Dr. Menachem came up with a term for white people, like similar. And it's kind of a hard one to hear sometimes, which is good though. That means we got to sit with it and give space, see why it might be this. But she calls it persistent, re-traumatizing colonizer and slave master syndrome. It's quite a mouthful, but I think it comes to the fact of like, just at this point for me, it's sitting with the space of that and learning how to heal from that is kind of freeing. You know, it's not really a good, bad binary or dynamic. It's about recognizing where we are, what our history is, how we're socialized in this society, acknowledging what that is, and then healing from it. You know, so that's kind of the bottom line. So we're coming to healing. How do we heal?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so we've actually done some of that. One of the big things, reading, so learning the history. Learning the history gives context to historical trauma and to past. So learning history and understanding how that system works is an aspect of healing. Understanding, like reading Dr. Joy DeGruy's Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome and Dr. Resmaa Menakem's My Grandmother's Hands, both healing. Dr. Menakem gives exercises, body exercises. So going into the body itself, there's many things that can heal it. And really the healing process is about balancing the nervous system that I talked about earlier. So the way we do that is through breath. This is why so many people teach breath. So the breath is a way to activate that nerve that I showed the picture of before. I can put it back up. So the breath activates this balancer, this vagus nerve here to help calm the sympathetic system. There's many different types of breath that work. One of the ones that I love is called the lunar breath. It's all through the nose. So it's breathing in through the nose and out through the nose, because there's nitrous oxide in the nasal cavity there, and it helps calm your nervous system. It helps stimulate that vagus nerve to balance the sympathetic system. So what that is you breathe in normally, you just breathe in, and then you'll breathe out, and you'll take it out like 1 second longer than when you breathe in, back out through the nose. And just try it. And you breathe in. Out.
And folks, let's try that now. Try it now with Gillian and see if you notice a slight difference. You want to start us again, Gillian?
Sure. So you want to just, the key is, again, is to slow down the out breath. So it just slowly comes out a little bit longer. So breathing in, out. In.
Yeah, I certainly feel a difference.
So you may feel a calming, an opening. Yeah. It calms your system down and really settles your body. When you settle your body in this way, you can also help other bodies to settle around you. Because that nervous system reflects it out, right? And then someone reflects into it, and then they're able to bring them settle their bodies as well. It helps them settle their bodies as well. There's times where I will be in a stressful situation, you know, where things are kind of going crazy, and I'll start just doing this breath. No one will know I'm doing it, and the whole room will change. It'll calm down. I've also used this with kids, with babies, when I'm working with them and they're crying, I'll start this breath and they'll calm down and settle. When I worked on the grand jury, I was on the grand jury for a year.
Oh, wow.
There was a moment where it was very challenging, and everyone got very stressed in there. And I was sitting in the front and I just started doing this breath. And then after a couple minutes, you just felt the whole room just kind of settled in. So it has an effect when you start to really get into it and you practice it more.
Yeah.
You can do it at any time, like whenever you're stressed, and it will help settle your body some. Yeah. The other things that are very healing are music, the devotions. Think about how you feel. Maybe next time before you pray, see what your body feels like. Like go into the sensations of what your body feels like before the prayer, when you say the prayer, and then after the prayer. Notice the differences. It has a healing effect.
How would someone go into their body? You know, listen,
That's an excellent question.
you
And
know, make that first
it's
step.
hard for some people to go into their body. I
Yeah.
get that. If you've been through a lot of trauma, sometimes you do not want to be in your body.
Yeah.
You know, the body's a scary place to kind of be sometimes for some people, not everyone, but it is. And then learning how to feel that.
Just
That's
kind of like,
kind of a big, so there's it takes time. Like don't beat up yourself if you can't do it in the beginning, you know, but it's really about feeling your feet on the floor. Notice if you can feel your feet on the floor.
okay.
Feel your seat, you know, feel your bones on the chair.
Mhm.
You can even feel the clothes you're wearing. Like, you know, what
Feel
do you
your stomach, you know,
feel
is
your
it
stomach?
grumbly or
Notice your heart. Yeah. Just
okay.
really feel like and feeling your feet on the floor is a good one because anyone can kind of get an idea of what that is.
Mhm.
Dr. Menachem has a bunch of exercises that help with this process as well, especially if you're fearful to go into your body, because sometimes there's a very real reason that is there. Somatic therapists can also help. The healing from the core stuff that I've been doing also is very effective. There's many ways to work with it, but you have to take time and be patient with yourself.
Right.
Yeah. One of the ways that you can so the other things are drumming, singing, humming. Think about what it's like when you're in those, say, even the Blackman's gathering that people used to join.
Oh, yeah.
When they were together, their nervous systems became in sync. They were reflecting off each other. They were grounded with the drumming and the healing process
Oh,
that was
yes.
happening there, and they were as one. I mean, that's an example of the oneness of mankind right there. You know, how do we encourage that in all the spaces? Get safe enough to where people of different backgrounds can be safe enough to have that in one room. You know, it's the long-term goal. That's the goal, right? So praying and singing together, even just humming together, dancing together, all of those things have a healing process to them. There's also healing circles that many people have been a part of. I think even Carol Campbell's stuff has a healing component because it's learning. The calls that Barbara Talley puts on in the morning, I can't remember what they're called, but those are huge healing spaces. I mean, we have
prayer calls, I think.
emancipation circles are great healing spaces, you know, and that's communal healing because we need to do that communal healing as well as the individual healing. Now, one thing I want to bring up too is, well, I don't know if I should go. Yeah, and there's many other ways that we can go with healing. Storytelling is huge too.
Why storytelling?
Because it gives a context for things. It gives you a way to express yourself. The spoken word is extremely healing. When you had the spoken word,
that's true.
It was because it moves people. It affects, so music affects that balancer of the sympathetic nerve, that vagus nerve. Music calms it down. You know, that's why there's music therapy. And I know there's people on here who've done stuff like that, you know, and it's very effective because of its art, you know, expression. That's why the arts are so important. You know, anything to do with the arts can be very healing. If it's done right. I mean, you can have, I guess, corrupt art in a sense, but like in general, any of that stuff is very healing. Learning, meditation. Meditation has a huge healing component. Oh, and that reminds me. Thank you, Sherilyn. I know you didn't remind me, but
right, yeah,
you did in a way. Here we go.
Oh, right, yeah.
This was shared on Barbara Talley's one of her things, and I loved it. And I was like, oh, I like that. So people think about healing being this meditating peacefully in there, but there's all these different components to healing. So we have this unpacking of trauma, you know, and I think a lot of learning of the history and those kind of things and going to therapy and talking in some of these groups is part of that, is unpacking what is going on. Having difficult conversations. So being able to communicate about reality of things without getting defensive, even if they're uncomfortable. Taking radical responsibility for your actions. That is huge. We need to take responsibility for our actions. And this to me falls under the defensive aspect again. If someone says something that you did is harmful or hard or problematic, listen to what they're saying and take radical responsibility for your actions to do better, right? To learn. Right. This is a learning process. Humble posture of learning. Implementing healthy routines. So this to me is like the meditation and the prayer and the music and the, eating good food, taking care of yourself health-wise. Exercise is huge. Exercise is another stress reliever and balancer, but not to overstress. So like, I have a lot of friends who are into triathlons and do like Ironman over and over. That balance. We got to enforce some boundaries there too. So we got to balance everything. And setting and enforcing boundaries. If you're in a situation that is too hard right now and that you need to put a boundary up that says, no, I'm sorry, I cannot participate, or I need to stay home and sleep today because, I need to process and heal whatever I'm going through, and that's okay. You want to be able to do that. And enforcing boundaries with other people, like saying yes when you can and no when you need to, and being okay with that. And that is okay, and not letting people cross certain aspects of your boundaries so that they are damaging or causing harm to you. So setting and enforcing these boundaries is very important. So there's a lot of components to to healing trauma. And that brings me, I think, to our last slide. I should have kept sharing my screen. I'm sorry. Really, to me, this quote that I'm about to have Nathan read is what got me to the name of this presentation tonight. So this is where I kind of came up with it after doing this. So, and there will be music playing in the background called The Flash of the Mirror by Kevin Locke, for those of those who knew him.
Therefore, our duty lies in seeking to polish the mirrors of our hearts, in order that we shall become reflectors of that light and recipients of the divine bounties, which may be fully revealed through them. This means the oneness of the world of humanity. That is to say, when this human body politic reaches a state of absolute unity, the effulgence of the eternal sun will make its fullest light and heat manifest. Therefore, we must not make distinctions between individual members of the human family. We must not consider any soul as barren or deprived. Our duty lies in educating souls, so that the sun of the bestowals of God shall become resplendent in them. And this is possible through the power of the oneness of humanity.
I know. I can't find a place to stop it. Are you able to stop it, Nissan?
There we go.
You are muted, though.
Oh, he muted you. So we could figure it out. That was...
Should I leave? Oh, sorry.
There you go. You're back. Well, he took you off again. Can you put her back on, Nason?
I can't get rid of the music. Can you hear it through me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
we
I
can hear
can't find the
music.
place to stop it.
Okay, so that means you can't answer any questions, huh?
I will. Can I go and come back? Should I leave and come back?
Absolutely. We're going to
I will be right back. So you guys can, I'll be right back.
Very short break. Thank you. That is just amazing. What I'd like to ask folks to do right now while Gillian's coming back in, which worked out really well. How many people thought that was an amazing presentation? If you just kind of, I mean, wow, this is like my second, third time going through it with her, and I'm still blown away by it. There is just so much in there. It's just incredible, just incredible. And I hope you understand why I had the chat closed down, and because there are so many minds in there. The chat, we shut the chat off, except some of you have messaged me directly. We're going to turn the chat back on in just a minute.
And I'm back, by the way, Sherilyn.
Okay, great. All right, let me do a little segue here. Is the chat back on for everyone, Nason?
Yes, I just turned it on.
Oh, thank you. So for those of you that arrived late, please hold off on your comments real quickly, just a second. No, never mind. For those of you that arrived late, please tell me where you're from, your state and city. We would appreciate that very much. Now's a great time to put your kudos in there for Gillian. And we actually had a little exercise we were gonna try. And what do you think, Gillian? You think we should do it?
We can. Why not?
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Regina, are you around? Oh, there she is. Okay. She's here. This is Regina. And she happens to be my sister, but that has nothing to do with what's going to happen next. But she sang and hummed this beautiful prayer of the Bab at our last devotional. It's the first time I'd ever heard her sing it and or hum it. And it felt so soothing to me. So I thought, Gillian and I talked about this, and I thought, well, that might be nice. Let's just check in with our own selves about how we're feeling in our bodies. And then Regina is going to sing this for us. Stay on mute. It is a call and response, and she'll explain that to you. So if you'd like to participate in it, you certainly can. And then after she's done, see how you feel. I don't know, I'm like all hyped up and, just full of all these things going off in my brain from Gillian's presentation. So let me turn it over to Regina. This is very short. It won't take a long time. And then we'll go right into questions. I'll ask you to put your name in the chat if you have a question or comment, and we'll go from there. Okay, so let me turn it over to Regina, and we'll see how this feels. It's beautiful nonetheless.
Okay, so yes, do remain on mute, but feel free to participate on mute if you want to.
So what part do we participate in, Regina?
Just the humming.
The humming, okay.
Yeah. Of course, it's a prayer of the Bab. I'm sure many people know that. So they can also, once they catch the tune, sing along. Mm-hmm. But okay. If you stay on mute, it's better. Otherwise, it becomes cacophonous and not soothing. Okay. Mm-hmm. 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 Oh God, my beloved. Oh God, my my heart's desire. Mhm. 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 Oh God, my beloved, oh God, my heart's desire. Mhm. 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 Oh God, my beloved, oh God, my heart's desire. Mhm. 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 Oh God, my beloved, oh God, my heart's desire. Mhm. 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 Mhm.
Thank you, Regina. So friends, just check in with yourself, if you felt anything different, maybe not. We just thought that might be a nice opportunity to kind of, just take that deep breath out and then go into the Q&A. I can't thank you enough, Gillian. I'm telling you, this was just stupendous. Just stupendous. And I'm sure I speak for everyone. We want you back because we'd like to hear more. Wherever your research is taking you, your interest in this, we'd love to hear more about it. Your passion and your knowledge and your commitment and belief, in the work that we're all engaged in just comes across, just totally comes across so strongly. And myself, if there was one big takeaway for myself from your presentation, the information you provided, it's just another way of being aware of our interconnectedness. The fact that my feelings, my breathing has an effect on the person next to me. That's amazing, and we truly are interconnected. So I'm not going to say any more. I've got 28, 23 things in the chat. So give me a second. I'm going to go in there and start from the top and go down. Looking for people who have something they'd like to say on this. Whoops, that's too big. Let's get that down there a little bit. Okay, there we go. So let me get up here to the top. Okay. Oh, also, yes, this is recorded. It will be on YouTube. All of the references that Gillian made mention of will be made available. I send out an email when the recording is ready that has all of that information contained in it. Gillian, there's been a request to have your slides. Is that something you're willing to do? Okay, then that email will also include the slides from her presentation. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, I'm not gonna read all of the great things because you'll get that. I'll read some of them, but you know, I'm trying to get through the list so we can get to people with questions. This is incredible. I have a chronic illness related to the autonomic nervous system. That was from Hannah. Julia Resma's podcast interview with Higher Practice podcast is great. The traumatic roots of white body supremacy and racism in America. September 16th of 20, that was from Julia. Thanks folks for giving me your location information. From Winnie, even knowing the anatomy, etc. This is so revealing. It makes so much sense. Great presentation. Thank you so much for the super helpful presentation. That's from Kate Songer. Hi, Kate. Good to see you. Parva. Oh, you're just giving me information. Hi, Parva. Grateful for you and your insight, Gillian. That's Hedaya and Charles G. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Amazing. Spread out from Roya. Wonderful presentation, Gillian. Wow, very enlightening. This could be a full college course. You hear that, Gillian? Yes. Dear Gillian, it was an illuminating presentation. I am thankful. This is Shiraz Mojani from Reston. Thank you, Regina. Thank you, Regina. Beautiful and soothing. The chant was very soothing. Thank you, Regina. Thank you, Gillian. Said the name, Abraham Kinney. We'll get you the name. Mweke, thank you so much for this presentation and the wealth of information. Bravo. Profound, wonderful, very welcome to my soul. Will share widely. Boy, everyone's just got comments, no questions. I mean, geez. I would love to have a summary of this to use in the course on racism I will be teaching next semester. Can squeeze in 15 to 20 minutes for it. That's from Winnie. Roya, I'll just add that when I studied to be a certified music practitioner, we also learned about the effect of music, which is basically vibration impacting the nerves in the ear, calms the vagus nerve.
Hey, Carolyn.
Yes.
Could I say something to that comment?
Who's that, Roya?
It's Gillian.
Gillian. Oh, yeah, sure, of course.
I just want to say that when I was said that earlier, Roya knows I was thinking of her.
We lost you, Gillian.
Oh, you can't hear me?
You came back now, but you went off just for a second.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, no, when I was bringing up music earlier in the music therapy, probably Roya knows, I was definitely referencing her because I know she's been working on this. But okay. The ear, the listening and the impact into the nervous system from the music and even voice, you know, when the writings talk about the lodestar of the hearts of men, the lodestone of the hearts of men, how kindly tongue is the lodestone of the hearts of men. When you speak with a kindly tongue, people are able to hear you more because it soothes the nervous system. Wow. So when you speak with that kind voice or you sing, you know, it opens you up to hear with your deeper heart or your deeper ear, right? And it affects you on that deeper level. That is why when they talk about teaching or talk about trying to communicate with someone, if you use a kindly tongue, you'll get more, that they'll be able to receive that information better. There's a scientific aspect behind that. And it balances your nervous system and theirs so they could actually learn more.
Wow.
And the other component of it too, because the mouth is also connected. So that is also why food and eating together is also a healing, connecting process. It also affects the vagus nerve or that whole system, because that digestion is part of that vagus nerve as well. And that eating and swallowing and all that. So that is why having meals together is also a very healing process.
Wow. The science and you know, the spirituality and the science, the harmony of science and religion is just amazing. You know, I mean, these examples here, I'm just, God, this is just so exciting. I mean, I'm sure many of you knew some of these things, but to hear them put together, you know, in this way is just wonderful, just wonderful. Okay, another one. Oh, this is from Melinda, one of the Baha'is here hosting this event, or a series, I should say. A wonderful presentation when Baha'u'llah explains that the light of love cannot dwell in a heart possessed by fear. Whoa, yes. What you are addressing is how we can physically address this fear so that love can enter into our hearts and create the healing and unity. Yes. Let's see here. Dave, sorry you got here late. My fault for not including Eastern time in this. Again, this will be available on YouTube fairly soon. So you can go back and get the parts you missed. From John, when I started humming and chanting along, my 3 sleeping cats awoke and all started walking toward me, calling in the cats. We got a cat whisperer in the house. That's great. Amir would like to make a comment. Wonderful. Please, Amir, please go ahead. You are first up with a verbal comment.
First of all, I want to say again, thank you for this wonderful presentation and this forum as well. I come to you from a background which is a Jewish background, and I was actually born in Jerusalem and lived in Haifa for 5 years, but never knew anything about Baha'i. But just learning recently about it here in Nanaimo, BC, Canada.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So my comment is that concept of the memory, trauma memory, going through the DNA is so powerful in my mind, because my grandfather and grandmother, both their families have been perished in the Holocaust, and I could definitely feel it in my body when I was reading about issues related to the Holocaust. I mean, that is not about what's happening in North America, but for me it's very, very important. So I understand so much more now based on that presentation, and obviously it makes a lot of sense of what's happening here in North America, in the United States, and so on. So I just want to share that's what kind of what I thought, and I'm happy that somebody is actually making presentation to police officers about this, and maybe one day the police officers will change their way of how they police us, the public.
Toda rabba.
Thank you so much, Amir. And again, welcome, welcome, welcome from Canada, from Haifa. You've been around. Welcome.
I would also say that with the little bit that I've learned about the Baha'i faith, which is learning now the first book about the Ruhi book, if you guys know about that quote that Gillian has shared with us is there in the third section, third or I think in the third section of the book, about the fact of the mirror and the light, And also I wanted to say that what I understood from that image is that if your mirror is full of dust, obviously there's no light shining, and even if you clean that mirror one day, it's not enough. You have to continue cleaning it once a week or once a day, or maybe continue cleaning it, because if you don't, it gets dusty again.
Yeah, it's very insightful, Amir. Very insightful. And thank you for sharing about your family. We're very sorry that has been the experience, but we're grateful that you shared it with us.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Gillian, did you want to add anything to Amir's comments?
Well, I appreciate your comments a lot, Amir. And actually, one of the studies that they did specifically was with Holocaust survivors and all in their family members. Was one of the studies that they looked at for epigenetics of what I was talking about. And that feeling that you have, that visceral feeling, you know, when you read or see certain things that are related to your family, like everyone has aspects of that in their lane, you know, in their specific experiences. You'll have a visceral reaction when it connects to you, and it could be a family genetic historical connection. But when you have a deep visceral feeling for something, that's your body telling you something, you know, and it's worth listening to too. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Nathan sent a message saying it takes about 1 to 2 weeks. The last one I sent out, it was ready in 4 days. So I'm getting better, but I have to wait on Nathan to get the recording. So it's on him this time, how long it's gonna take. So you make it won't take 1 to 2 weeks. Hopefully it'll be within
We'll work on it.
Yeah, it's within a week is what we work on. So I just wanted to share that if you'd seen that in the chat room there. Okay, Chuck would like to ask a question. Chuck?
Actually, I have two things now.
Okay.
First of all, to Amir. Welcome, brother, welcome to the family of Bahá'í. Welcome, brother, welcome to the family of Bahá'í. And in this moment fleeting, we bring to you this greeting. Welcome, welcome, aloha, welcome, welcome, aloha.
Hey. You guys are just so delightful this evening. You always are, but so many nice surprises. That was wonderful, Chuck.
Thank you. The question that I had to do with retention of the trauma when you don't bring it back into the balance. I'm wondering, it would seem to me that if you have that retention, it would cause, as the writings said, imbalance as far as both the spirit and the body is concerned. And I'm wondering about physical chronic conditions that can be attributed to that, like so many African Americans have high blood pressure. And I'm wondering if, you know, things like that could be attributed to the imbalance of the vagal and the other part of the nervous system that we were talking about.
So yes, absolutely.
And what other diseases might be?
Yeah, a lot of them, actually. Many diseases are based on an imbalance. And actually the writings talk about that as well. But when your body is out of balance in different ways, then you'll develop disease, right? There is a term for like when you live with this daily racial trauma, you do develop health issues. And actually there's a term for it. It's called weathering. And that is why it is a huge component in life expectancy in Black and Indigenous people and others, Hispanic. high blood pressure, diabetes, all of that can be linked to this kind of racial trauma. Absolutely. I would also say that this trauma affects white bodies with, it kind of looks to me, and this is just my impression now. So this is not, it looks more like an indifference or apathy or a depression. Like there's other aspects that other bodies experience from the dissonance too of how they move in the world versus recognizing people fully, I don't know if that's a good way to say that, but yeah, all diseases come from an imbalance of some sort. Like cancer is an overgrowth of cells that don't work. It's an imbalance within your system. And our world right now is very imbalanced. It's chaotic. And for us to live in this world, it's very hard for our bodies to be in balance because our environment is so messed up. Our nutrition is so messed up. I mean, the stress that's going on right now, it affects all of our systems, and it's hard to keep, and eating right is very challenging, and exercising. We know these general things that are good for us, but just the stress level and living a discordant life, a dissonant life, an unjust life affects all of our systems. And we're all connected, like we were saying. So if a group of people are oppressed or in pain, it affects us physically, all of us. It affects our environment, all of us. And I think I saw someone talk about the quantum field. Yes, we're all connected together, through this field, with the earth. Yeah. So anyways, it's all one thing. Yes. False dichotomy. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Rebecca, do you want to ask your question or do you want me to read it?
You can read it. Yeah, I think it's clear.
Okay, well, some people like to say their own questions. Okay. Rebecca says, you talked about the connection between the spirit and the body, quoting, I believe, Abdu'l-Bahá. Could you expand a bit or go over again how this connection is understood between the spirit and the body? So maybe that first slide, I guess maybe you're thinking possibly.
Yeah.
That first one.
Is it okay if I share that then now?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm going to try if I can find it. And hopefully I won't have that same problem where the music starts and then we can't stop it. This is the quote that I shared at the beginning. So it talks about how our bodies, so the way I think about it is our body is our instrument with which our soul is able to reflect through, like a light does through a mirror. So if we think about that from that context, if we picture how a big light, I don't mean like a little tiny light, you see a pinpointed light, if you have a big light source that reflects through a mirror, that mirror reflects fully light through, back out. Every cell of that mirror is reflecting light back out. If it's clean and pure, it fully reflects. If there's a dirty corner, then it may reflect through all the other spaces, But if we think about what this quote says on how the body and the spirit interact and what the body is used for, is that know that the influence and perception of the human spirit is of two kinds. That is, the human spirit has two modes of operation and understanding. One mode is through the mediation of the bodily instruments and the organs. And this to me is, your gut feeling, your heart, you're feeling warmth in your heart. This is your organs talking to you. It's the instrument and the mediation of your organ systems communicating through with your soul as well. Thus, it sees with the eye. Your spirit sees with the eye, hears with the ear, speaks with the tongue. These are actions of the spirit and operations of the human reality, but they occur through the mediation of bodily instruments. Thus, it is the spirit that sees, but by means of the eye. It is the spirit that hears, but by the means of the ear. It is the spirit that speaks, but by the means of the tongue. Second, the rational soul, meaning the human spirit, does not descend into the body. That is to say, it does not enter it, for descent and entrance are characteristics of bodies, and the rational soul is exempt from this. The spirit never entered this body, so in quitting it, it will not be in need of an abiding place. No, the spirit is connected with the body as this light is with the mirror. So when the mirror is clear and perfect, the light of the lamp will be apparent in it. And when the mirror becomes covered with dust or breaks, the light will disappear. And yeah, that is from Abdu'l-Baha in Some Answered Questions. Actually, go ahead, Sherilyn.
Oh no, I wasn't saying anything.
So that part I'm understanding that, although I'm guessing that this is a newer translation than some of the things that I have. So I'm not as well caught up. There was another one where it said something about the nerve, and it was definitely on your slide.
Oh, the sympathetic nerve.
And is that one of the newer translations? Because I'm thinking, I don't remember ever seeing this. So specific. And so I'm like, and then I'm like, so I'm thinking about what this first one is saying, and then what this one is saying.
Right.
And I'm having a little bit of disconnect and understanding how that's connecting. That's where I'm like going, wait a minute.
So this is my perspective. I'm sure there's so many deeper meanings to this, and I probably have a limited understanding. So I'm only going to go from my perception of it.
Right.
Because I think we're limited in our knowledge at this point based on, even though we know a lot, there's a lot we don't know. So to me, the nervous system is another instrument through which our soul interacts and our body reflects through. And the sympathetic nerve goes from the brain, as you saw, it's all up in here. It goes down all the way through the body. And so to me, it's a direct way it's kind of one of the main ways that the soul reflects through the body, and the balance of it. That's how I kind of think of it. It's our measuring, or our ability to connect with others, to trust other people, to build community, to have true fellowship, because that nerve is what reflects off another nerve that causes those bonds scientifically, right? It's how we know we can trust somebody. It's how we know we can love somebody. It's how we can communicate. If those nervous systems are shutting down a little bit, then our communication is broken down. We feel we can't trust another. So there's a component there to me of a way of reflecting through.
So let me just see if I've got this. You're rephrasing it, that Abdu'l-Baha has put specific things that connect to the rational faculty. And then the second part, he's talking about the rational soul. Mm-hmm. And what you're saying is this vagus nerve is how you're understanding it, almost a link between the rational faculty and the rational soul, where it's possible that this physical thing is a piece of that connection of the heart, the spirit, rather than okay. So I do
that somehow. Yeah.
Right. And you're right. There's, who knows, the research is developing.
It's new.
So thank you. Very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
I understand better now what you're saying.
Yeah. And if you think about like those gut reactions, those gut feelings you have, that's where your vagus nerve ends, is in your gut. It's that sensory of like, oh, this is a problem. I can't do X, or, whatever it is. It also affects the heart, right? So it's part of your heart space. And we know what the level of the heart, like all the quotes that refer to the heart, right? It's connected to that. So it's really remarkable. I think there's just a lot we don't know, but I think it's fascinating, and I'm very excited to continue learning about it.
Thank you for your research.
Definitely. Could just a point of clarification, Gillian, before we go on. Mm-hmm. Just now, did you say it was the sympathetic nerve that ends in the gut, or the vagus nerve?
The vagus nerve. Well,
or both, kind of.
Yeah, I didn't go into all the attachments of the sympathetic nerve, because that's
okay.
Yeah, like the parasympathetic, the vagus nerve connects into the gut. And I think the confusion is because the other word for vagus nerve is parasympathetic, goes with the sympathetic, right?
Okay, I wasn't there at all. No,
sometimes parasympathetic will pop out on accident, and
you didn't say that. I don't.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Parasympathetic. No, that was a foundational question to ask. My real question, which is, because they end in the gut, can that explain, for example, overeating, where someone wants to shut that down? Right? It's, maybe one of them's too hyperactive or something.
Overeating is a trauma response.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But would it be because the act of eating, impacts the stomach and then deadens the nerves, is what I'm asking.
It doesn't deaden nerves. It's more like, because nerves to deaden is kind of a strong, there's usually a physical trauma impact aspect to a true deadening of, you can have disease that does it and stuff, but like,
right. Okay.
I guess in a way it's more that the balance of the nerves of how they fire, of what signals they're putting to the brain can be shut down or decreased or increased.
Okay. Or numbed maybe.
So it's the connection between and what the signals are going to the brain. So like for someone who constantly overeats, or the system that says they're full is not turning on, or they've suppressed it. So the nerves are not firing to say, okay, we need to stop. Or if they are, they're ignoring that and overriding it, and then the body adapts to that over time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, Samira, you had a question?
I did, but I wrote to you and said it's not that urgent. But first of all, I want to say Amir Naim Meod. It's so good to, well, my husband and I lived in Israel for about 15 years. So it was just really sweet to hear someone speak with an Israeli accent.
Again, that's wonderful.
I miss Israel so much. Yeah,
and
but
I'm sorry.
No, but what I wanted to ask was, it's not really urgent, but Gillian, when we lived in Israel, obviously so many people had family members that had gone to the Holocaust, just like Amir, but they never talked about it. And a lot of the family members would tell us, we didn't even know, we don't know their story. And is it because it's so traumatic that to relive it is just too painful? That's all I can think, but is there?
So when it comes to severe trauma, where it really affects the body systems a lot, it can be very painful to talk about unless a big chunk of healing has happened. Because then it becomes about reliving the experience, and sometimes you can't separate the reality from what's happening. So if you start talking about it, it's almost like a flashback. You get put back, your body puts you like you're back there. So that is that's challenging for people. So there has to be a certain amount of healing that has to happen for you to be able to talk about super traumatic events in present moment.
Makes sense.
And that takes a lot of body healing and talks that like somatic healing that can be which is necessary and helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question. And I want to go back to Amir to see if he'd like to share anything on that. Before we do, just a very quick announcement. We stay past 9:30. So if you're able to stay, please stay. If you need to leave, we certainly understand. So I just wanted to put that out there for folks. Amir, did you want to comment at all on Samira's comment?
I wanted to comment about another thing related to Gillian's presentation, which is the way I was introduced to the Baha'i faith was through my wonderful yoga teacher in Nanaimo, who is a Baha'i, and that is relating directly to this healing, one of the healing process. Of course, when you do yoga, one of the 8 limbs of yoga is breathing, is pranayama, which is technique of breathing, and there are multiple techniques of breathing. And I just wanted to tell everybody that
Okay.
Changed my life, so I would recommend everybody to find out more about yoga and if it can help them in their life.
Okay, thank you very much, Amir. Okay.
And I would just say it's very true that many Holocaust survivors have not said anything about what happened to them, and it's a shame. And some of them have only said and talked about it end of their life before they died, because it was so traumatic. One of the books that I read recently, which is called the Tattooist from Auschwitz. Wonderful, wonderful. I shouldn't say wonderful, but a very moving. Is about a man who was the tattooist of Auschwitz, and only the last 3 years of his life, he was able to actually talk about the horrible things that happened to him through the Holocaust, and that happened to many people. And I'm sure that Black people who were enslaved had hard time to talk about what happened to them because of that deep trauma that they and their parents or grandparents or whatever. And actually the same thing in Canada. One of the things that the big things is this, the First Nation people with residential schools that the Canadian government decided to put all the First Nation into, and in fact recently the Canadian government tried to do reconciliation, and the many of the people who actually testified in the reconciliation committee, or forget the tribunal that was set up, shortly after that committed suicide or died otherwise, because the trauma was so hard for them. It affected them such that they actually died from one reason or another, just to the pain.
Yeah, thank you, Amir. Let's see here. Melinda, did you want to make a comment, or did you just want it in the chat?
Just that comment. You can just read it, that's fine.
Okay. Melinda said, white people live in fear, which has been the reason for the sense of superiority to hide the inner fear. Yeah, I believe that's true in a number of ways, actually. Yeah, definitely. A number of types of fear. That's just my personal opinion. John, you had a comment or two in here. Did you want to share anything, or you're fine in the chat room?
I'm good. It's just a profound evening for me. It's like, you know, I see brilliant stars at night in the sky, and this evening is a star, but now all of a sudden I have a constellation and it has far more.
Very poetic. You're so kind. Definitely a star in the room tonight, for sure. Let's see here. Okay, then that takes us to, hang on just a second, Susan Crossley.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to respond, Gillian, to your comment. My parents were both survivors of the Holocaust, and I lost many, many relatives, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, etc. in the Holocaust. My parents actually were able to escape. But I've been over the years really getting in touch with how much I have been impacted epigenetically by that. And I respond to things, what I think about things. And what you said about it not being talked about is very true. There's so much. Unfortunately, both of my parents are deceased, and there's so much I don't know. And when they did talk about it, I just remember crying. It was just so painful. And usually when I heard something, I was overhearing it as a child, like when my father talked about his parents dying in the Holocaust, when he would speak to my cousin who was on the Kinder transport. And so I overheard some things rather than really talking about it with my parents. I just wanted to say what you said is so true. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Susan. Let's see here. Rebecca said, thank you so much for this gift of your work. I feel like I have another piece of the puzzle to healing from this disease, racism. Nason, a question from Sherry. Are there psychic receptor genes that can be passed down in families? And could Sherry clarify what she means by psychic receptor genes? Do you mean genes that incline one to be psychic? Do you want to come off mute, Sherry? I see you working it. Okay, we'll wait. Take your time.
Okay. Hi.
There you go. Hi.
I don't talk about it, but what I'm talking about is I have an aunt that is very receptive to people's thoughts. And through life, I've been that way. And I'm wondering, is that something that can be passed down? Because, like just yesterday, I was very upset and couldn't figure out why. And I kept thinking that there's this man that can't bury his mother because of the ashes. And I couldn't get it out of my head. And about 2 hours later, my grandson calls and tells me that there's a man on our property in Arkansas whose mother had died and had always wanted her ashes put at a spot on that land. And I mean, stuff like this happens constantly. And I find that sometimes when I'm in groups, I start getting anxious, and I know, and I can see that it's not me. So I was wondering, do people actually do that? I mean, am I crazy or what? So I was wondering if maybe my aunt does this, and I was wondering if there is a gene or something. You were talking about how the feelings and stuff can kind of pass down from generation to generation. Is this sort of something like that too?
I think that there's a couple of components to this. Yes, people do that because you do that and you're not alone. I think certain skills and abilities do travel down through the DNA. I think that is something that everyone has the potential to be able to do. Personally, I mean, it's probably worth looking into the writings more about details about this, because I know there's certain things they want like you to be cautious of in a way, but like I think we all have aspects of this in our intuition because we're all connected, right? So we would pick up information from other people and see things sometimes, and if you have that ability, I mean, you didn't develop it, it is what you have. I don't think it's something to fear. I think it's something to be interested about. It's not, because you're not trying to develop anything. You are who you are. You see things happen. I mean, there's many people in the world who do that. I mean, I have aspects of things that I read and see, when I work with the body system, sometimes I see the nerves. Just, it's very weird. It's an energy thing, but I just see it, go with it. I don't try to hone it necessarily, or I don't try not to unhone it. I just work with what I have, So I think we all have this ability. And yes, I do think it travels also within family systems, the sensitivity to it. Because I think everyone, you know, we get this, like, think of somebody and then they call on the phone, right? Like everyone has aspects of that. Or, you know, I don't know, that's just one example. I'm sure there's 100, but you know, yeah. So I wouldn't be fearful of it. I would just kind of, you know, it is what it is. It's kind of how I think of it. But.
Great moderate attitude to have towards it all.
Well, denying that aspect of yourself, if you naturally are like that, is shutting a piece of yourself off. You know what I mean? If you're trying to go out, you don't have an aspect of this, and you're like, I've got to find a way to tell the whatever, you know, then that's a different component. But if you're naturally doing stuff, the one thing I would say is, when you're in the room and other people's moods are affecting and pulling you down that way, sometimes developing a stronger boundary for yourself is very helpful, because you don't want to take on other people's stuff. So one of the ways that you can decrease that is that lunar breath we talked about, or some of the other breathing exercises. If you do yoga or whatever, just start doing the breath, and it will calm your system and balance it. And it will give you kind of a natural boundary around yourself, so that you may not have to take on other people's stuff around you.
Yeah, excellent advice. Thank you. You know, when you were speaking during the presentation, and this was a question I had, and I think this is a nice segue into it. So if folks don't mind, I'll step into the queue. I remember growing up in school, and you learned about inherited traits, right? You remember the little, you know, the blue eyes, the brown eyes, you inherit this, you inherit that. So is epigenetics fundamentally really any different than that? I mean, and for example, sometimes, you know, a family is known for a particular attribute or skill set. You know, some families are just highly musical, right? You know, everybody plays an instrument or has a wonderful singing voice, or, you know, or there's that family, you know, down the block for generations that has always been in trouble. You know, I don't like to use that example, but, you know, we've all heard those scenarios played out. So is epigenetics really just kind of another way, a more scientific way of talking about inherited traits?
Yes and no. Not also, epigenetics is the component of how environment and things around you can change you at the DNA level. Whereas inherited traits come from actual information from dad and mom, like blue eyes, right?
Okay.
So it depends on what you're talking about. Like musical ability, there's probably a natural connection to that. I would say that is something that travels through genetics. The family that's always getting into trouble, I would say, is a trauma retention reaction. It's not necessary. So the epigenetic component of fear and other things that are go in it, whereas the musical ability is not a traumatic retention aspect. It's a different kind of, it comes through the system a little bit differently. I don't know all the details around that because I'm not a geneticist, but like, just the there's a little bit different things, like, and epigenetics can be changed, right? So like when positive things happen and healing happens, that translates down, but also like with even patterns that aren't negative or positive, just habits or ways of doing things sometimes can shift through epigenetics between parent to child. And really it's about giving yourself space. So even with trauma retention, if you're going through where you notice you're perpetrating a negative action that you want to change, and you notice it, you acknowledge it, you stop, and you see how it feels in your body, that tension that you feel in your body, and you kind of sit with it with neutrality or even with compassion and breathe. And as you do that, and you just sit with it and feel it in your body system, you'll feel a little bit of a relaxation or an expansion or a yawn or a deep breath. And that is actually your nervous system giving you space so that there can be a healing moment. And it can be small or it can be bigger. But as you continue to do those, like say you're someone who just yells at your kids, or say I'm yelling at my kids all the time, I recognize it's a problematic behavior. And when I go to do it, I see where I feel that anger in my body and I sit with it and I just breathe until I feel it relax. That anger actually will decrease. And then the next, and I gave myself space for that healing process, a little bit of healing in my nervous system. Then the next time I won't be so quick to anger when something happens with my child. Now, it doesn't mean it's gone altogether, but it's deep. And that'll change the past over time. That changes the patterning so that my child then doesn't develop the same patterning.
So in a sense, very generally speaking, you could say that, would it be fair to say that, the debate between nature and nurture. So epigenetics is more on the nature side and, the nurture side, and nature is more on the traditional genetic side.
Yes, I think that the nurture would be an aspect of it, but there is a genetic component. So it's epigenetics is like a newer field, and they're still just learning a lot about it, but it explains so much. It's like so relieving they found this, it's very exciting. So I think we're going to learn so much more over the next several years.
Absolutely. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Thank you. Winnie said, hearing this, I can begin to understand, but not overlook some of the behavior of police. Roya has written, or do you want to speak to your comments, Roya, yourself?
No, it's just right there.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll share it then. Roya says, I'm half Iranian Persian. Iranians have racism too. Yes. I have to assume there is trauma there too. Yes. But I don't know enough about the history to pinpoint it. By the way, both branches of my Iranian half were Jewish originally. Does anyone have insight into this? And then later on, after some further thought, Roya says, I think it's a combination of issues with Iranians and overall with many groups of immigrants. That would be a great topic for another presentation. Thank you. That's an excellent idea, Roya. Appreciate that. And if anyone has insight into that, please reach out to Roya.
Okay, Roya, if you want, we can talk later too, if it's too much, because I have some ideas about that as well, based on some of the stuff I've learned from
Great.
others.
I mean, if other people are interested in hearing it, I'd love to hear it now, but I don't want to take.
I didn't know if they wanted to make it as a whole nother thing, but this is just my understanding.
Well, we might, because I'm not saying don't do it now, but
I think it's a good idea to do a whole thing on this.
Yeah, the Persians.
I think absolutely, because there's a lot to this. But slavery was in Iran like it was here, and a lot of the boat, like when people were being shipped here, for chattel slavery, there were boats leaving the east coast of Africa going up to Iran, and also walking through the peninsula over into Iran, as slaves. But the type of slavery was a little different. It wasn't chattel slavery. So the children of those slaves were actually allowed to be free. But I know that there's a dynamic of because when even in Baha'u'llah's family, like when he received the slaves of his father, he freed them. That's where that thing about slavery comes out of one person cannot own another person,
right.
Was because of that. So there's an aspect of that dynamic of anti-Blackness in Iran as well. It's just built, there's little differences about it, but it's still very much there. That's how you can have a Haji Firuz, in that space and be okay with it, of what he was a servant of the Shah at the time, right? And come down and act like there's all these components to it. So absolutely, I think that there's a component within Persia to a point. And then when moving here, it kind of solidifies sometimes even deeper because of how our system here is built on it. Like if you assimilate into American culture to where you can become successful, you have to buy into the white supremacy on some level or another, because it's about anti-Blackness, right? It's about pushing down the other, and then to buy into that system, and then say, how come you can't do what I just did? Because they don't understand what the system is that they bought into, because they don't understand how the system works. And people don't know the history when they come from, even people living in this country don't know the history of that. So assimilation into American culture, you kind of automatically assimilate into the structural racism that is through all of our systems, so it solidifies it even more. But it's a worldwide issue. It is not just a US issue. It's just we've honed it and put it into our laws and into all of our structures in a way that not everyone has. Our country was built on it foundationally, whereas other countries existed prior to. At least that's my understanding of it. I'm sure there's much more. And if we did a whole talk fireside on it, I'm sure there would be some amazing things that come out of that. And I absolutely cannot lead that because that is not my expertise at all. Just this little piece I said.
Sure, thank you. That was a good little piece. You covered a lot of territory in that. And that is a good topic. And I did misspeak. That was actually Parva that wrote that comment. It was a response to Roya, saying, that she thinks it's a combinations of issues and that it would make a good presentation topic. Thank you, Parva, and forgive me for not seeing your name in the tiny blue up there. I believe in giving credit where credit is due. Let's see here. Milton says, another great session. This one has helped the pupil of the eye to be better oriented on the path we all learn to walk. And let's see, Amir, yep, you're on the list, Amir. Thank you for joining us. Let's see, a couple of good nights. Amir has a question, but he's gonna wait. He thinks wants to make sure everyone else has an opportunity to share and speak. I need to jump to Mayron. Mayron, did you wanna ask a question or make a comment? You said please in there and I don't know what that meant. You're on mute. I can't hear you. We can't hear you.
When there was a question about should she speak on that, on the race and the Jewish people, and I said, please do, because the Iranians, because of all the trauma, I believe, from what I've been learning about myself and my history, through the history of America as well, I'm recognizing, if I may express this, that the reason that we actually gossip so much, we backbite anybody, not just Iranians, but anybody that gossips and backbites and point fingers and undermines others. When we do these behaviors is because of trauma, because we are trying to look better than our brethren and sisters. It's come to me that when I do not gossip and backbite, when I really focus and don't gossip and backbite, those fingers are pointing at myself, and Baha'u'llah says so. Look at yourself, right? Look at the woman in the mirror. And the more we do this, the more we look at ourselves in the mirror, we recognize our issues and we would never point our fingers at anybody else because there's so much trauma. There's so much, none of us come from excellent, perfect families. And so we have to recognize that and don't pride ourselves, oh, my family is blah, blah, blah. Because in Baha'u'llah's family, there were covenant breakers. So if he is showing us that anyone can go be tested, believe me, we Iranians are tests. I apologize for all the tests I've caused. So I will quit now.
Thank you, Mayron. Okay, well, there are a number of other comments, in the chat group or chat room or the chat relating to other things. There's been rooms and groups and Zooms and everything else. Do we have any other questions or comments specifically for Gillian that anyone would like to have an opportunity, or someone who hasn't had an opportunity yet this evening to share their thoughts or their questions. Going, 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 gone. Okay.
I think Parva has a question.
Okay. Parva? Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, all right, there you go. So I am the most interested in the role of immigrants, actually. You mentioned very briefly in the beginning, and that definitely got my attention. This whole role of, I mean, tension that's going between black and whites in this country is really crippling the whole society in every level. And more I look at it, like this really is a basis of a lot of problems that can go away just if we could get over that one. And yes, immigrants to a huge extent, especially in the early years, we are totally oblivious about the matter.
Right.
Whether it's about not knowing the history or not, or overall the cultural aspect, like certain things are like 180 degrees different. And for me to reset that whole thing and come to terms to figure out what's going on here is already like 10 years gone. However, what I noticed is that is the most productive years to actually have some bonds with different groups, because I have absolutely no idea whatever this person is telling me means. Because basically, like, there are certain vibes that I'm not getting. There are certain level of hostility, or there are things that I'm like, I'm basically here for getting certain opportunities, and I'm here to rock and roll it. And okay, fine, I'm here to make friends and all. And certain baggages don't even exist. It takes a while. And after a while, they start establishing, because now I understand when you were looking at me nicely and saying certain thing and I thought it is nice, now I realize that it really wasn't. But that 10 years, in fact, in that sense, is pretty productive. It's pretty good. It's still a lot of positivity in it. So regardless of whether you're from Iran or we are talking a lot about Iranians because Baha'i community has one of the biggest groups of immigrants in Baha'i community is Iranians. But the same thing goes, let's say, between African Americans and Latinos in larger society, because then there is a tension between those two groups. So you were having a quick mention about immigrants at the beginning that caught my attention. In my opinion, the best solution to the problem of black and whites in this country are immigrants and interracial marriages, both of which could be pretty overwhelming at a certain point, but I mean, those are really, I think, are the solutions. And of course, creating friendships and all of that. But how do you see that, like in a sense of how do you fit in the immigrants in the sense of the overall presentation that you had? Because on top of all of this, of course, we all are coming also with a different kind of baggages, with a different trauma, but of course, in a way different level. This is a 100% different society. Like I would imagine if it for European immigrants would be probably easier to understand. For perhaps Middle Eastern immigrant is not. Because again, in certain points, it's exactly 180 degrees different.
Yes, you present a very interesting solution, which is in part was one of the first things, not the first things, but a significant thing that Abdu'l-Baha did when he was here with Louis Gregory and encouraging his marriage to a white woman, a white Baha'i. But this is just, and this is a huge, huge subject. Everything you raise is not going to get addressed here, not tonight anyway, certainly. And I know you know that. I know you're aware of that. But I would say this, that there is no panacea. It's not as simple as people intermarrying. There is far too much baggage. There's just far, far, far too much. those interracial or intercultural marriages do in fact happen quite often, both within and outside the Baha'i community. And certainly they produce a good effect. But we really need to look at the guidance from the Universal House of Justice and from the National Spiritual Assembly, particularly on the matter of race and racism in this country. And intermarriage is not one of the solutions.
Oh no, I'm not offering that as one of the Baha'i solutions. I'm just saying the overall, the way I see it, that's a, that is.
Were you thinking in the wider society?
Like until, I mean, I'm not married an Iranian, and it was not until then, until I entered an American family, that I realized certain things that I would not have possibly, even though I entered this country. And the first thing I did, I went to the college and tried to become familiar with the legal aspect of, I mean, learn about the legal principles. And then the second semester, I'm taking a history class because I want to know who am I living with. Like certain things, regardless of how much you try in the society to try to be and mingle and read and learn, you're not, I mean, to me, it was not possible until I actually married.
Well, it certainly gives you a greater depth
not
of
even in the
understanding.
workplace or not in, like certain things you don't, then you realize after that, oh, okay, certain behaviors in workplace are coming because they're so rooted inside, even within the family structure, let alone. So so I think that is definitely going to be that is definitely bringing people closer or collapses a lot of those cultural barriers. But in the meantime, I think overall immigrants, because of the different kind of backgrounds they're coming into this society, that is, I would say, very mentalities are very poisoned by this whole idea. We are at certain point, I remember I was talking to, I mean, it was hard to I should even address a different person. For example, I mean, if I'm calling a person like a black, they would be upset. If I'm calling them African American, the other one's going to be upset. And I remember one of my colleagues was like, so why do you keep referring to us as African Americans? I'm like, well, because the last person when I said a black got upset as to why. I said, like, well, how am I supposed to talk? Am I supposed to be constantly on edge as to what I'm saying, that who's going to be upset with it? Whereas, let me know what the issue is so I can at least educate me.
Yeah,
I'm here to learn. I'm here to be a part of the community, and I want to know what I should do.
Yeah,
I don't want to be constantly getting, or the other way around. Like, what's with the constant hostility? And we are here to play. Teach me what to do, and I'm here to play and be there and try to. And I don't know.
Well, Parva, let me give you a short response to the one particular instance that you've struggled with, because it's very understandable. And then we're going to go on to some other things. Okay. And I would encourage you, if you're not in some of these other spaces, such as Barbara Talley's, and I'll put that in the email, because she has some great groups with people, as well as some references for some friends that are online, the Iranian Baha'is against racism. That's an excellent place to explore as well, if you're not already familiar with it. But let me just speak to that one instance, because it does happen to people, and I think it's relevant to everybody here in the room, or has been at some point. Well, gee whiz, so-and-so got offended because I called them black. So-and-so didn't like being African American. What's the right one? Okay, I just want to know the right one so I don't make any more mistakes, and this is not an issue anymore, and I can get on with that part of my life, okay, and not worry about eggshells around that. That's where friendship comes in, and that's where asking questions comes in. So if you're having a conversation, hypothetically, you're having a conversation with someone and you're not sure how, don't assume, because rule number one, and this is something you can count on, absolutely you can take this to the bank, as we used to say, a very old expression. the African American community, the Black community, the community of people of color is not monolithic. There is so much diversity, and how I feel about being called is going to be different from the way my daughter might feel, you know, or someone else. It's very individualized, and these different terms have very different meanings that change and evolve. So the one thing you can count on is that we are not monolithic. The best piece of advice, I think, to anyone is ask, you know, and I've said this to my Latina friends. You know, I've got Latina friends. Some are from Central America. Some of them are from Mexico. Some of them are from Spain. How do you prefer, you know, to be referred to? I ask them. Some of them aren't comfortable with that, you know, because they're not used to a racial reference, but I ask them. That takes the burden off of you, okay? And then the other thing is, as you become friends with people, it's easier to ask these questions and to find out, how do you feel about these different terms? You don't even have to say, what do you want me to call you? You can say, you know, I hear all these different terms. How do you feel about them? And then you can engage in a meaningful conversation around race with them and educate yourself in the process. So those would be the three things, you know, that I would suggest on that particular topic. But thank you very much for your comments. You know, it's the huge thing. We certainly will definitely do something on immigrants. I think we will focus that on a particular immigrant community, because different immigrant communities interact and absorb differently. Okay, Persians are not the same as immigrants from Sudan, you know, or from Latin America. The experiences are going to be different. So it has to be very culturally specific. And since this series focuses and is designed primarily for the Baha'i community, it makes perfect sense for us to do something like this, specifically with the Persian friends. And I'm so delighted that so many of the Persian friends are here this evening, and we're at our last session as well, because we need to hear from you. We want to hear from you. This is something we're all engaged in together and working out together, but it's not something we're going to figure out, okay, we're done, you know, we're good now, and, you know, we can all go on happily. No, everything's constantly moving and changing, and we have to be able to do that as well. But at the same time, recognize that we're talking about individuals at the end of the day. When you talk about culture or groups, you know, you're abstracting, but the interpersonal at the individual level, that's where, you know, we really make a change within ourselves and for each other. So unless there's any other comments for Gillian, we're going to wind down tonight. And I'm going to ask, Kenton, are you up for that song one more time? Kenton, by the way, is down in Chile. So glad you made it tonight, Kenton.
Yeah, I've been zooming all
Oh, I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Barely.
What time is it there?
He's in the same time zone we are, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, which is great. We can't hear you, Kenton. So I guess we can't do the song.
He's muted.
Okay. Well, thank you. We're gonna look forward to it next time, Kenton, when you come back. Absolutely. That was so much fun. That was so much fun. Okay, friends, would anyone like, oh, Amir, I'm sorry, Amir?
I just want to say the question I wanted to ask is, when the first item for healing that Gillian was mentioning was learn the history.
Mm-hmm.
When you say learn the history, it's a big question of which history are we learning, because even recently there was some issues in New York about, you know, your current president preventing people in New York to learn the African American history, and the similar situation is happening in Canada, where the First Nation history has been distorted people didn't know about what was happening. So we actually learned the right history and what is the right. So that's a big question. Maybe it's, I don't know. Anyway, that's it. That's what I wanted to say.
I would just say that learning the history is important, because if you start to understand the history from other perspectives of people who lived through, we get a very specific type of history within our school system that is not fully correct. And we need to learn the real history of the United States, because we need to kind of acknowledge and take ownership, so to speak, or hold space for the trauma of our history. If we really understand our history, we gives us context for the traumas that people are reacting to right now. And when you have context for something, then it's easier for you to put a framework around it so that you might be able to heal. And when you don't have access to that history, then there's not the context. You're like, why is this? Is this really a trauma? Is this or that, you know? And I think learning the history through like reading books like Lies My Teachers Told Me, or Lies My Teacher Taught Me, or the history from an Indigenous or First Nations perspective, or for people who actually lived through enslavement, you know, like really learn the history and how laws were formed, you know, how the definition of the extremes of what being white meant, and how that meant power, how it's in our laws and specifically, and then how that really pushed for anti-Blackness, which is why the writings talk about working on the extremes of the relationship between white and Blacks. And everyone else falls in the middle. But when the white and Black people, or African American and European American history, however you want to describe it, heal to where they will connect, all the others in between, no matter where you come from, will also be healed, because these are the extremes. And that's why Shoghi Effendi specifically talks about healing between the two extreme systems, you know, the two sides of it. So to me, talking about this is connects all of it, no matter where you're from, immigrant or not. But there's different components and specific things that affect those different cultures in slightly different ways. But as we heal this bigger piece, these extremes, all of that will also be healed within the process. If we heal just the little pieces, like, oh, we're going to start here between, you know, this and Asian and this and, you know, whatever, it's still, there's that whole thing of anti-Blackness is at the core of everything, you know, so we have to work on that, and the other will heal. But yeah, I don't know if that's what I meant to go towards, but
wouldn't that be
Thank you so
kind
much.
of the white trauma that you talked about earlier, that long name? Can you say it again?
Persistent re-traumatizing, let's see, I might have to look at it.
Colonization or something?
Colonizer and slave master syndrome. Persistent re-traumatizing colonizer or slave master syndrome.
Yeah,
I mean,
and we can add that in the email.
Yeah, and it's really about that whole centering and whatever of that white experience, which our whole country's kind of built upon, that we have to break down.
Well, and have to identify it and get the history on it. And, you know, you're the first person that's named it for me, but I mean, as far as having a name, and I'm not sure whose history that you came from, but that would probably be a good read.
Yeah, the author that she's drawing from, that will be in the email, and with all of that information. So friends, I'm sorry, I am going to take us out here a little earlier than usual. I do have a very early call tomorrow, an intensive book 1 that's all day long, and then I go into facilitating another group immediately after for 3 hours. So Sunday's my go get 'em day, right? But not every Sunday. Not every. Oh yeah, I'll see you there tomorrow night, Berdina.
Yes. Good night.
Right.
Aloha, friends.
Okay.
Welcome, Amir.
Aloha.
I love you
Thank
all.
you, friends.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much, Nathan and Gillian and everybody.
Thank you so much. See you tomorrow morning at 9, right, Sherilyn?
No, I'm in a different group now.
Okay.
Yeah, I had to switch. Oh, Catherine's still here. All right.
Thank you, Cynthia. I hope people read your comments.
Oh, okay.
1619 project and all this.
Yep.
Right on point.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Good
And
night.
Sean, will you copy the comments? Because I can't copy them here on my end. Thanks.
Yep, I'll get them.
Hey there, Chris's iPhone. Okay. Hey, Bez.
Can you hear me?
Hi.
Hey, you hung in tonight. Awesome. Oh, you're laying down too.
Caroline's been here too.
Oh, great. Good to see you guys. Hey there.
It was so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Sherilyn and Gillian. It was wonderful.
Bye, Rachel. Thank you. Yeah, Gillian is awesome. I was just
When you do a recording, by the way, the chat is also recorded in a separate file.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, okay.
But I just wanted to make sure because Nason's recording.
Yeah.
This is not on our account, it's on his account.
Gotcha.
So I don't have access to it. Yeah, I double check everything now, you know.
I wondered why Hopkins was coming up as the Zoom account. Okay, got it now.
Hopkins. Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Is the recording going to be available?
Yes, it will be available as soon as Nason gets it to me. I don't have to edit anything really. I'm just going to trim all the chit chat up at the beginning before the devotions. And then and I get all the email stuff. I need all the references for the email and it'll all be out. It'll be within the week.
Okay.
It will be within the week. Good to see you guys. All right. So wonderful to have you here with us, Amir. Thank you, Nason's got the button. So when he clicks it, we're all poof, we're all gone.